So once again, welcome all participants to the secondary session. Today's session is being chaired by Dr. Sangeeta K. Pratap. Dr. Sangeeta is an assistant professor at the Department of the School of Management Studies of Cochin University. She's also an avid researcher and an advisory board member of the Women's Studies Center of Cochin University. She's also very much active as an NSS program officer at the university. So I request Dr. Sangeeta to take over the session, and Dr. K. Peravindran is also present now. Sangeeta ma'am, please.
Hope I am audible.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, hope all participants also have joined. Yeah, there are 31 out there. Okay. So we are in the second, good afternoon all, and we are in the second day of the FTP of gender sensitization. And as we know, this is a most relevant topic that we need to discuss today in today's environment. Not for the sake of discussions, but also it warrants actions which could transform the lives of mankind. And yesterday, we have all heard the fruitful, elongated session by Indu Agnihotri following the inaugural program. And today, our topic of interest is understanding gender. And no topic of discussion on gender sensitization will be fruitful if we are not discussing, if we are not understanding the precepts of gender. And there is much out there to know about gender and its connotations. And to start with understanding gender is the basic exercise that we need in familiarizing what is the difference between gender and sex. While sex refers to the different biological and physiological characteristics of males and females, gender refers to the socially constructed characteristics of women and men, such as norms, roles, and relationships of and between groups of women and men. And understanding gender identity and gender expression is also important in this context. And gender identity is all about your internal knowledge of your gender. For example, your knowledge that you are a woman or a man or another gender. And gender expression is how a person presents gender outside, often through behavior, clothing, hairstyle, voice, or body characteristics. And when a person begins to live according to their gender identity rather than gender that they were thought to be or when they were born, this period is called gender transition. Of course, I'm speaking about the transgenders. And we have a lot of discussion about the transgenders right now. Just because there was in news about a transgender committing suicide just because of the reason that he was converted into a she physically through a surgery, and there were a lot of complications which was related to such kind of aspect. And again, telling about the transgender, they are people whose gender identity is different from the gender that they were thought to be when they were born. So this creates a lot of problems. It is the matter of the society, what society think. Deciding to take a transition and can take a lot of reflection. And many transgender people risk social stigma, discrimination, and harassment when they tell other people who they really are. And despite those risks, some of them being open about one's gender identity can be life affirming or even life saving. So we need to discuss, we need to understand all these things about gender, the transgenders, and the gender connotation. So we have two experts today with us for discussing this. So let me just introduce the experts who are there with us. Dr. K.P. Aravindan. Dr. Aravindan is a science activist and a public health expert. He is a former president of the Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad, a progressive people science movement, and he was also a professor and a HOD of pathology at the Calicut Medical College, Kerala. So first we'll be having Dr. Arvindan speak to us for the first 1.5 hours. So he'll be sharing his rich knowledge and expertise with us, and we'll also have a discussion after he has shared his thoughts with us. So, and the second speaker is Prajit, and Prajit is an activist and founder of Finrhythm, a community-based organization working for the welfare of LGBTIQ people in Kerala. So we'll be having the first speaker, Dr. KP Arvindan. So welcome you, sir, to the session, and the platform is all yours. So first, you can just share. I think you have a slide to share for us. So after sharing the slide, you can just start your presentation. So thank you. The platform is all yours, sir.
Thank you very much. And first of all, let me warn you that I'm not an expert in any of these fields, basically. I'm just an ordinary doctor and an activist. And I would like to speak on these issues with a focus on the biological issues regarding gender. And of course, any other thing as and when it comes up in the discussion, I think we can go into that. So I will start sharing my screen. Okay. We all have been brought up in a society where we think of a natural order of things, or we have been taught that there is a natural order of things. And a very important part of this natural order is the division of the sexes into male and female. In all our holy books to epics and everywhere, this is what we have been taught. Apart from that, the society also reflects these thoughts, and the division of labor between men and women is a reality of the society. And we tend to take this as one among the natural order of things. So much so that the most important question that we ask when we hear that a baby has been born to someone is that, is it a boy or a girl? And right from that question onwards, the influence of that question and the influence of that thinking, whether it is a boy or girl, will follow the child for the rest of its life. Now, in this traditional thinking, it is said that God created two sexes with definite roles for each of them, and going against it is being against nature. And of course, now in the modern world, you know that a lot of people actually do not, lots and lots of people are actually non-believers, especially in Western societies now. And so the narrative has been changed a little bit with the help of science. Now they say that evolution selects what is natural. So there is a natural division, and evolution, this has been selected by evolution, and going against it is harmful to the species. You can see that this argument, however way you put this, you can see that this is basically defending of the status quo. Basically saying that whatever is there now, it is a natural thing, so please don't change it. And this is also what I would call a right-wing ideology. Right-wing ideology is against change. You defend the status quo. So how much true this is what I'm basically going to examine in the next half hour to 45 minutes of this talk, and then this can be followed by the discussion. We talk of nature and nurture and the importance of relative importance of nature and nurture if we want to see among humans and other species. In the picture, you see a calf. As soon as this calf is born, within minutes, it will stand up, and by sheer instinct, it will go and find the mother's udder and start drinking milk. In contrast to that, look at the human baby. The human baby is absolutely, completely helpless when it is born, and it has to be nurtured from the very first minutes of life for a long period of childhood. So you can very well imagine the importance of nurture in human beings. Now, the kind of ideology that I talked about earlier, in order to defend the status quo, sometimes they will say that this is the nature, and so you cannot change nature, men and women, nature. You cannot change the roles of men and women. On the other hand, you can also hear the narrative that if somebody behaves in a particular way, not fitting into this male and female binary, you can say that, oh, that can always be corrected. There's nothing natural about it. This can be corrected by later on in life, or you can say it is nature. So alternatively, they will make arguments which are either for or against nature or nurture to fit their beliefs. So in this world, there are very neatly, it is divided into two sexes, as I said, male and female, and no other, and with definite roles for women and men separately. So in that world, women will have certain kinds of roles and men will have specific roles. And certain branches of what I would call pseudoscience helps to reinforce these notions. Two examples I would say is what is called social Darwinism, which applies the biological concept of natural selection. It's the most important driving force of evolution, as we all know, and it's the fundamental concept in biology. So they will use this biological concept of natural selections to differentiate between individuals and groups in society and bring up all kinds of theories which will say that men and women are different in many ways. Even among the various races of human beings, there are differences in intelligence and other things. And all in all, they will finally argue that as a result of natural selection, some people have come to the top and some to the bottom, and this is very natural. And so don't change that. And they will also say that men and women have been given assigned roles, and this is again natural selection. So please don't change that. So this is a pseudoscience called social Darwinism, which has nothing to do with Darwinism, it has nothing to do with natural selection. It is a pure and simple pseudoscience. And now increasingly, there's another very fashionable branch of pseudoscience, what I would call as pop psychology. And about this again, I will talk about later. So this is another kind of pseudoscience which gives all kinds of make-up fanciful stories. This is basically making up all kinds of fanciful stories to give explanations for all the different differences. So what I will be speaking on today is these things. One, first, are there only two genders? Second, are gender identities and sexual attraction innate or acquired? Then are there gendered brain differences in intellectual capacity? And whether gender division of labor is justified in modern societies. This is the scheme of what I will be speaking of. We all know the myths of all ancient societies. Every society had a myth, and the Mars and Venus. Mars, the warrior, represented the male, and Venus, the goddess of love, represents the woman. But reality is not always very starkly these two genders only. In reality, you have a lots and lots of diversity in human behavior, human perceptions of identity. So much so that this is what it is, like a rainbow or different colors in a spectrum. So we use different terms like gender, sex, orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and so on. So very briefly, just looking at this, gender identity is basically a function of the brain, that what someone feels like. I think or I feel something. I feel like a woman or a man. So that constitutes gender identity. Sexual orientation is, let us say, of course, it is again a function of the brain, no doubt. But here it is represented as the heart. So it is what you basically like is sexual orientation or attraction. Then you have the biological sex, which is expressed in your secondary sexual characters and genitalia and so on. You also have what is called a gender presentation, how we present ourselves to others, present ourselves, the way we dress and the way we make up and so on. That may not actually strictly correspond to the gender identity or orientation also sometimes. That's why it is given separately. Now, if you look at the definitions, you can say that sex is physical classification of people by reproductive organs and the chromosomes and hormones and all the biological features. And sometimes you can have intersex, or in which this is not very clear. So general term used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with reproduction sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit strictly into male or female. And gender is culturally and societally determined meanings assigned to male or female as a label, which is again created by the society and assigned to the individuals by the society. Gender identity, on the other hand, is internal, psychological or spiritual sense of one's own perception of what we are. This can be in opposition to the socially defined idea of one's gender. So society may say that someone belongs to this gender, but that particular person may not feel so. And the transgender people, they are persons who are internal gender identity does not match with the anatomical or assigned anatomical sex or the assigned gender. Now, sexual orientation is the pattern of emotional, romantic, or sexual attraction. The basic thing, not transient ones, but the enduring pattern of these attractions. Now, there are various orientations of sexuality. Some people may lack any sexual attraction, say that it is asexual. Bisexual is attracted to both males and females, though this may not be equal. Heterosexuality being attracted to members of the opposite sex, and homosexuality attraction to people of the same sex. This is completely different from the sexual identity, and despite whatever be the identity, you can have different orientation. So you have multiple different permutations and combinations of these. When you talk of sex itself, it is not very simple and straightforward. You can have chromosomal sex, gonadal sex, ductal sex, genital sex, secondary sex, sexual characters. Now, chromosome sex, all of us study in school that you have XX, XY. XX is female, XY is male. But there are ever so many different, other than XX and XY, you can have differences of combinations of the sex chromosomes. YY I have shown in red because YY does not occur, because YY fetus will not be viable and will not develop. But all other combinations can happen. And for example, this girl has a complement of chromosomes that is 45 chromosomes with one missing, only one X chromosome. So this is a condition known as Turner syndrome. You have this, it's a condition where there is three sex chromosomes are there, XXY, and this is a condition called Klinefelter syndrome. And all these have specific features also, like Turner syndrome. They may have webbing of the sea. You can see this neck, webbing of the neck, and some other features, maybe their short stature. And this most of these girls will not attain menarche or have the periods. And sometimes that is when it comes to notice. And similarly, Klinefelter, and not only XXY, there may be 3XS and Y, 4XS and Y, and so on sometimes. So even the simple question of chromosomes, it is not simply XX and XY. Now coming to the gonadal sex, having, of course, you have chromosomes, but it does not always strictly translate into the gonads. So basically the gonad begins as a very neutral kind of thing, the indifferent gonad, and by the influence of a molecule, a gene product known as SRY, it can differentiate into, in those particular, usually those having Y chromosome, but not always, and this can differentiate. If it is there, this gonad will develop into a testis, male organ. If it is SRY is absent, then it develops into the ovary. That is how it usually occurs. But again, this may not always work like that. So you can have sometimes a Y chromosome containing somebody with XY develop an ovary, or vice versa, XX person developing a testis, or sometimes both ovary and testis, both may be there. And genitalia also may be having both. So all these kinds of combinations are possible. Then you have the ductal. Ductal sex means the organs like ovary, the uterus and fallopian tubes and prostate and such things associated with either the male or the female. Again, the SRY and some other signaling genes are important in the development of whether along with testis, whether epididymis and vas deferens, prostate, seminal vesicles that develop, or the uterus, cervix and vagina will develop. But here again, there can be problems. These are all these ladies are basically, they have XY chromosomes. All have testis producing testosterone. But the problem is that they have testis, they produce testosterone, but the tissues lack a receptor in which testosterone can act. So androgen is produced, but it is not sensitive to this testosterone, and they develop as women. They'll completely look like women. So their sex was male, but the gender identity is female, and the sexual orientation usually, I'm talking about the majority. The majority will have female gender identity, but there may be transgender people in this group also. And the female heterosexuals behavior is the usual one. In fact, many of the androgen sensitivity is quite common condition, and many of the athletes, for example, like Caster Semenya, all of you know, had this XY chromosome. It's only later she was completely brought up as a girl, and she lived her life as a girl. She went for this athletics and performed well, and suddenly somebody found that she has XY chromosomes. But despite that, of course, her gold medal still stands. She is accepted. Of course, there is still a debate going on around that now. Okay, so then comes the genital sex. So even in genital sex, there may be ambiguity. So exactly, is it male or female? Sometimes it may be difficult to identify the genitals. So they may be XX or XY or some other combinations, but other factors also in developing of the genitalia may be abnormal. So there's a condition called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, in which there is more of androgens being secreted by the adrenal gland, basically, and again producing this very frequently ambiguous genitalia, usually in girl children. So here the sex would be female, more physical activity, gender identity is female, and sexual orientation in higher incidence. Usually female heterosexual, but with a higher incidence of lesbian groups among them. So basic and secondary sexual characters you have. In this also there may be many differences. It may not always correspond strictly to the chromosomal or other sex identities. So basically, and on top of this, sex itself is very diverse. You have very different combinations. And apart from that, then you have the gender, the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, attributes that a given society considers appropriate for men or women. And so genders, as soon as we identify the sex, we assign the gender roles, and the society will reinforce usually the gender roles in a particular way, which may differ from societies to societies. But most of the societies, you find some kind of reinforcement of the gender roles. But all this actually very immutable. So one question that arises in identity problems particularly, what is it that is important, nature or nurture? There are some experimental studies or observation studies regarding this. One is this is one example that I've shown. So usually in congenital adrenal hyperplasia cases, or in many other cases in male children, like when there's a very early injury to the penis, or when penis has not been developed properly, or there's a condition called cloacal estrophy. All these conditions, usually what is done is that they do corrective, earlier at least. What used to be done is they used to do corrective surgery so that they will be reared as a girl child by removing all the parts of the male thing, and then reared as a girl child. So what would happen is that in a very large proportion or a very significant number of cases, you find that these children who are actually, they have all the action of the male hormones on the brain, testosterone action on the brain in a very early life, and the genetic makeup also. And because of this, that is so much imprinted in the brain that they wish to have identity. They have identity. Large number of such children have identity problems. So what we learn from this, two things. One, that this is something innate or innately wired in the brain, and you should not do a corrective surgery very early in life, because you really do not know that many of them may choose a different identity later on in life. So this is very true of what we call as the transgender people. Discordant sexual identity in some genetic males with cloacal atrophy. This is another study in New England, recent study in New England Journal of Medicine. Assigned. This also says the same thing, actually, the same message. And now generally the scientists, whether you see most of the scientists in this area, neuroscientists and other scientists, this is a recent article in Nature where during Trump era, during the period of Trump, they wanted to bring in very strict rules, because there were some controversies regarding transgender people and whether transgender people should be allowed to use the toilets as per their desired gender, and all these were some issues. And they said that no, we are going to bring rules so that you assign a birth. At birth, do some tests and chromosomes and other tests and assign birth that it is either male or female. So this is an editorial coming up in the foremost science journal, Nature, and saying that the US proposal for defining this gender has no basis in science, because science does not condone that kind of. Science will accepts, today's science accepts the diversity, and it does not condone that kind of binary thinking into male and female. And you see that this kind of messages, again, that I don't know how many have seen Chandubutta, the Malayalam movie. It reinforces that kind of message, that this kind of behavior, obviously this character has preferences to be, to act and do everything like a woman, Dilip's character, but just by corrections, it is all because of nurture. Now they blame nurture. Nurture is all the system because you're brought up like that. So you just have to change by appropriate kind of things. So there is a proliferation of all kinds of therapists and advisors and all other kinds of people, who will, if you take the child showing any such behavior, you take the child to them and they will somehow change them by all kinds of their psychological treatments. In contrast, I would like all of you, actually, anybody who can get hold of, if you have Apple TV, this is a movie that came in Apple TV recently called Palmer, and how most Western societies have now, it's a very, very sensitive, highly sensitive movie regarding a young child, a young boy who likes to be a girl, actually, and how sensitively this is handled. Unlike our Lal Jose movie, I think Lal Jose and company should see such movies, actually, how this is handled in contemporary societies. Now, coming to sexual orientation, again, there is a continuum from exclusive attraction to the opposite sex to exclusive attraction to the same sex. Here again, very similar to the transsexual condition, genetic factors, and very early uterine environment, right at the time the baby is in the mother's womb. All these are important. So again, you have multiple patterns or multiple colors of the rainbow, and increasingly many societies are now beginning to accept this diversity. And any arguments against it, again, I should state that it has absolutely no grounding on any biological science. So basically you have biological sex in which there is male, female, or in between, intersex. There's gender identity, can be man, woman, or it can be a third gender or bigendered or a different identities. Then masculine or feminine, the gender expression can again vary. One can be androgynous, have both, or sexual orientation, attracted to men or women, or bisexual, asexual, all kinds of combinations are there. And it is time that we understand this and understand this diversity and accept all this diversity in a just and humane society. Now we have, the good thing is that now there is, the beginning at least had been made, and now we have more acceptance of the transgender people. Among the transgender people, also there can be differences. It can be a transgender man, a person, individual who is currently identifies as a man, or somebody who identifies as a woman. And there are other kinds of sexual, the gender preferences. And apart from gender identity, there can be gender preferences, dressing and other things. Rituparno Ghosh, the famous filmmaker, was an example. He used to like dressing up as a woman, even for public functions and all that stuff. Even among transgender people, there are multiple groups and classes. I won't go into the details of that. And is it a disease condition? ICD, International Code of Diseases, still has a classification, ICD-10, it's called gender identity disorder. This has been objected to, and that because this is not a disorder. On the other hand, now the current classification, the psychological mental diseases classification, DSM-5, the new classification, it's called gender dysphoria. That is, everybody with a altered identity may not come to that. Gender dysphoria is those among them who have problems because of that, because they have adjustment problems or other problems, or which may not be their making. It is the impact of the social and other conditions that produce those problems, but that can be dealt with, and this is called gender dysphoria. So basically, the issue in many of these people, both sexual orientation as well as sexual identity, different from the binaries, is a real societal problem, basically. Because, as said in this quote, because the society hates us, why are we anxious? Because it doesn't seem like we can be true to ourselves and accepted by the loved ones at the same time. So, and this is not a very insignificant, rare condition in our society. So they are part and parcel of our society and should be accepted as such. So I will just stop here at this part. I will stop here with just a reminder that many things remain to be done. One, for example, the main health concerns in, let's say, the transgender people, for example, they have problems in access to healthcare. They go to a health center, they are treated, not treated well. They are looked down upon by many health providers. Then they need, those who need reassignment, they need hormones, that treatment is frequently not available. All kinds of problems are there in sex reassignment surgery. First and foremost, it's not available. When available, there may be complications or other things, as the recent controversy showed. Then the increased sexual transmitted diseases are prevalent among these people. One reason being that many are forced to work as sex workers. Cancer also is higher. Violence is much more directed towards them. And many they have more depression, anxiety, and many problems of health concern. And this should be also our societal concerns. Now, their concerns have to be the societal concerns. Now, with this, I am going to the second part of this talk. That is the gendered differences, brain differences. How much and how important in what areas. So this is just a caricature to show that the pop psychology thinking, that just to show the difference in man is very logical, A to B, very direct line. But this woman's logic, from reaching from A to B is very fussy. And in other words, women are not really very logically brainy like the men. And this is just a cartoon representation of the pop psychology thinking. Like male brain, there are different areas neatly apportioned in the brain to exploring and action, computer, the power tools, guide talk, sports, and so on. And in women's brain, you have places for shopping and gossip and bizarre moods, fantasies. So are male brains and female brains so different? That is the question that we have to ask. Is there any stark differences between the male and female brains? I would say absolutely not. Many species, that there is sexual dimorphism. Like gorillas, there's a very obvious sexual dimorphism. The male gorilla is much bigger than the female. Many birds, there is sexual dimorphism like this one, and males maybe highly ornated feathers and colors and everything. Maybe they may be bigger and with all these ornate features. And most of it is because of sexual selection. It is the male is so attractive looking to us, because female wants that. So female selects that, female selection. So it is called sexual selection. So sexual selection among the males, if you want a female, you have to have bigger, better feathers and so on, like in peacocks, male peacocks. So that's an example of sexual selection. But many birds, there is no sexual selection. So the male and female may look identical, no differences at all. So are humans dimorphic? That's a question. So are humans dimorphic? I would say that very little. Actually, there is a slight increase in size of males, but that is not a big dimorphism. Average male is taller than an average female. Average male has more muscle mass than an average female. Yes, that much is there. But it is an overlapping curve. So much so that many male, many females, many women are bigger than many men in this world. So, and if somebody from another planet comes and looks at all the males and females, they'll think all these are just part of one group. They won't think that there are two different, completely different two types of. In males and females, the difference. So we are now interested in the brain basically, and in the brain and some of the sexual secondary sexual characters, it is influenced by hormones. And primarily the difference is between testosterone and estradiol. Initially, you have low testosterone and estradiol, and then there is a peak very early after birth. In the first year, there is a peak of in both in males and females, testosterone as well as the estradiol will increase, and then it will come down. And after that, so here itself in the brain, this effect may be there, estradiol increases in females and testosterone increases in the male, producing changes in the brain. Then it comes down, both comes down. And again in puberty, just before, at the time of puberty, both will increase. And this will produce all secondary sexual characters. So initially itself, there is some differences made in the brain. Then that comes down, and puberty, again, secondary sexual character, it goes up. And then both testosterone in male and estradiol in female will remain elevated during the reproductive period. The male testosterone may come down a little bit, but it remains relatively high. But the females, after menopause, this estradiol will come down sharply. This is how hormones will function in the male and female. And it produces the obvious secondary sexual characters and the genital organs, as we all of us know. So the important question is male-female differences in instincts, emotions, and behavior. All are products of the brain. So the products of the brain, like instincts, emotions, behavior, are there genetic differences producing changes in the brain very early in life in the brain, and possibly prenatal hormone-induced differences? Are there differences because of that? Or are these differences, if at all, whatever differences are there, are they acquired? Is it by nurture? Is it learning-induced differences? This is the fundamental question. Prenatal testosterone effects, is it there or not? Absolutely, it is there. But how much, where, what for? There have been studies in songbirds, rats, monkeys, and humans. All these have been studied. This is the songbird. And the songbird's brain, there are some areas, some nuclei. It is called nuclei. It's a group of neurons are called nuclei, group of neurons. HBC is one area. RA is another area. So POM is another area. And all these areas, males have a bigger, more nuclei. Mind you, this is, if you take a songbird, the female songbird brain and male songbird brain, both will look very much alike. It is only when you really cut it up and then you look at these various areas and count the neurons, then you will find that some are more in the males, some areas. All others are not same, but this area is bigger, and this helps the songbird to sing. That's why it's called a songbird. And why does it sing? The male songbird will sing, and the female will choose according to the best singer will be chosen by the females, to mate. So for mating purposes, to attract the female, it is again a function of reproduction. So these hormones will make changes that are reproductively useful for the male. In this case, so reproductive, so brain, of course, there are changes, and these changes point out that it is in the areas which are essential for the reproduction. And that is why makes the difference even between males and females in human beings or any other animals. It is differences in the brain because of that. In the rat, for example, there is this sexually dimorphic nucleus called SDN. SDN, in mammals, you have this SDN is a nucleus. So SDN nuclei, again, you have in this particular area. So in a normal male, this nucleus, if you have this nucleus, the rat will show mounting behavior for the sexual reproduction. Now, if you take a normal female and inject testosterone, then a very, very young, at a very young age, if you inject testosterone in a very young age, it will increase the nuclei in the SDN area, and this female will show mounting behavior. Similarly, in an androgenized female, you remove the, so this is the androgynous female, the nucleus will be increased. Similarly, if you remove the testes in the male, it will not show the mounting behavior. But instead, it shows female behavior, or it's called the lordosis behavior. Same thing has been shown in very similar studies have been done in the sheep. And basically, it shows that for sexual reproduction, some areas are important. And for sexual behaviors and sexual reproduction, sexual attraction, and these are dimorphic, or there are dimorphic areas in the brain which are solely for this purpose. So in the human brain also, near the hypothalamus, you have such areas, and these are the nuclei, BNST and INH3 and so on. So this BNST, INH3, both these are important in this behavior. And there are some studies which show that sexual orientation as well as gender identity may have something to do with the development of this nuclei. Again, showing that these are due to changes very early in life, because in some studies it is shown that the INH3 nuclei, the number of neurons, men it is higher than in women, and in gay men it is similar to women rather than the other men. So, and this is another study of this, another nucleus. This is again shows that heterosexual men, homosexual men here, no difference between these two. But male, female, transsexuals, the number of nuclei seems to be in between the heterosexual man and heterosexual woman. So these are not very hard and fast rules or anything, but basically many such studies goes on to show that brain differences are there in sexual orientation and identities, and these are developed very early or hardwired in the brain, either genetically or very early in development. And the basic message is that these are not things that you can correct by your counseling or other kinds of interventions. But when you come to the acquired behavior, so are these actually important for everything? Apart from sexual things, or even for other things, everything, can you extrapolate this and say that male and female brains are completely different? So that's the basic question. So just a small study as an example, of boys' toys, use of boys' toys in twin girls who had a girl twin. The other, both were girls, twins with two girls. They are identical twins basically, or a girl with a boy twin. So he said the girl with boy twin will have the boy's testosterone. Boy will have a little bit of testosterone, which will get through the vessels, which the blood vessels, which both of them share, and it will get into the girl's blood also. But despite that, there is no increased preference for boys' toys. Whether it is girl with girl twin or boy with boy twin, there is no difference. On the other hand, if this girl has an older brother, then this girl shows more preference for boys' toys and for athletic games. So what this basically shows is that in such matters, it is the nurture that is more important than this gene or hardwiring. For functions, because basically, again, I will say that some of these changes are there because of the chromosomes and genes and the consequent hormonal changes on the brain in fetal life. All these changes in the brain and the differences in brain are reflected in the sexual identities, preferences, and behavior, but not the other functions of the brain. So there's no point in extrapolating all these differences to all other functions of brain and saying that all the genders are very, very different. So in human beings, nature is important, but so is nurture. as I said, human baby is absolutely helpless, and we make this baby learn through so many years of coaching and schooling and so on. And the nurture builds on what is primed by nature, no doubt. The brain section showing synapses, this is in a newborn. Very few in these neurons will make connections between them. So each of our learning experience will make new connections between neurons. By 3 months, you see that there are so many connections. By 9 months, all these connections number has increased, and this will increase. And this will go on in early years of life. This brain will be constantly making, neurons will making connections and breaking connections. More breaking and making these connections depending upon your experience. And finally, it is this experience that makes you into a person. This experience that makes you what you are. And this experience builds all these connections and electrical wirings in your brain and make you what you are. So basically, the importance of nurture, it cannot be underemphasized. So what are the differences at birth? Sex ratios in birth, of course, there are about 105 boys are born for every 100 girls. We don't know exactly in every place like this is true. Slightly more boys are born. Maybe the Y carrying chromosome swims faster or something. I don't know. But this ratio is maintained every time. But usually male babies are more vulnerable. They die at a higher rate. Till recently, because now our medical facilities have improved so much that we are able to save all these babies. So the sex ratio of more males may continue for longer periods than before. Okay. So even in the neonates, there are these theories, like pop psychology theories. They say that even at the very youngest baby, there are males and female differences. This is a very highly quoted study. It's called Baron-Cohen, a person called Baron-Cohen. Baron-Cohen's study is highly quoted in all the pop psychology literature regarding perception of neonates. Basically, the study is that a baby just lying in its crib, neonate, young baby lying in a crib, is shown the face of a woman and the face of a device like a mobile phone or some machine. And they said that, even at this stage, there is such a big difference because the girl, if it is a girl, it will look more at the human face. And if it's a boy, it will look at the machine. So, which means that boys, even at that time, they are oriented to become space scientists and great mathematicians or technologists and so on. And women are primed. They are even at that point, they're destined to become caregivers, nurses or teachers and so on. If you really look at the study, this is what first and foremost, people have asked, is this baby able to focus properly when you show this? The focus on the baby's eyesight, to see this itself is very fuzzy. So, despite this, they found this difference. And what is this difference? 45% versus 49% recognizing face. Not percent, it is seconds, sorry. The female will look at the face for 49 seconds on an average. Male will look at for 45 seconds. That's a difference. What a huge difference. And this kind of it's obviously stupid kind of study. These are the kind of stuff on which such big things are made regarding male-female differences with ultimate consequences and policy, And now coming to differences in first year of life. Boys have bigger head and brain, by about 9% bigger brain or head. But people make big thing about boys having a slightly bigger brain. but they also have bigger kidneys. But does that matter? Girls develop faster and are less susceptible to illness. See, all these are small differences, weak differences. And some of it may be reflected by the size also. And the girls are slightly ahead in numbers and the number of words. Because the reason is not because they have highly different language skills, but girls generally tend to develop faster. They are always 1 or 2 months ahead of the boys of that same age. 1 or 2 months ahead of the boys of the same age. And so they may pick up more words in that time. And so this is basically, these are all, as I will emphasize again and again, these are not overlapping changes. These are dimorphic. These are not dimorphic, but overlapping changes. Male and female graphs look like this, not like this. Not like the left one, but like the right one. Many studies show that there may be slight differences. Again, slight differences in toy preferences. Toy preferences, there may be slight differences in a girl toy or boy toy or neutral toy. But just to be seen that many males will pick up a girl toy also. The girls will pick up a boy toy. Or such overlapping is always there, and slight differences are there. Like a girl, there are many girls which will prefer a car set or mechano set or something. So, but there is a lot of innate reinforcement parents also. So there may be parents who say that appropriately toys are given to the sexes, genders. And if it's a girl child, they will give more likely to get dolls. And if it is a boy, more likely to get cars or other toys. But a girl playing with cars may not be, parents may not mind, especially in today's times, parents may not mind all that much, On the other hand, if a boy will play with dolls and so on, then the parents may become very worried. In many societies, it isn't like that, because they'll be scared that the boy may grow into a gay person or something maybe. So they will reinforce and never let a boy play with a doll. They will always give it that kind of toys which they think is more appropriate. And so this kind of reinforcement is always going on. And so whatever little differences are there are magnified and reinforced by the parenting and later on by the teachers also. Like aptitudes in language and maths, role of teachers and parents. So the teachers will encourage, depending upon their perception of boys and girls and how they should be. In language abilities, girls do better in most studies. One thing, as I said, picking up early on, because they pick up words faster, because they develop slightly earlier. But also because of parental communications. It is seen that mothers speak more to girl babies than to boy babies. And toys, appropriate toys also. So in many of the SAT score, SAT is actually a kind of examination that is given in the US, United States, prior to the university. So in the SAT scores, you find that the verbal and writing scores, there is not a big difference in males and females. But when it comes to mathematics, the average aptitude score, aptitude test, the SAT score, the average score seems to be more in the male. With the male mean value average of 531 to the female average of 499. So much has been made regarding this, saying that this is one of the most quoted figures to say that boys have higher skill for mathematics, and that is why they do better in many of the so-called STEM subjects. STEM is science, technology, and mathematics, engineering and mathematics, STEM. So STEM subjects, boys tend to do better because they have higher mathematical and spatial kind of skills are better in them. But just look at this. This is again SAT math test results by gender and ethnicity in the United States. One thing that is quite obvious, is that overall average for male is 524, female is 494. You know that you look at these averages, it is heavily dependent upon the socio-economic factors. See, the black average of black people is 430, Hispanic people is 468, and the white person is 550. So there is a heavy socio-economic effect on this. So nurture and the attendant benefits actually increase their score, so much more than genes. Moreover, look at the male and female difference. Look at the Asian figure. Asian boys have 614. Asian is mostly Chinese, Indian, Korean, and so on, there's one group who do extremely well in education in United States, maybe because the parents are still first or second generation parents who have gone from here. Of course, the upper class parents who have gone from this country to force their children to study, all the time, unlike in the Western societies. So maybe it's the effect of that. And also they are economically well off because Asians are the number one in economic income-wise, they're number one, even ahead of the whites in the United States. But the interesting figure here is female Asian, the score is 590. And the white male is only 550. So is it that the female Indian or the female Asian girl has better genes than the white boy? Obviously, you can't argue that, no? So these things are heavily determined by nurture or the culture rather than your genes or the hardwired male-female brains. Regarding all this visual spatial thinking, you have this mental rotation kind of tests that are given and in which the boys are supposed to be doing well. Here again, the kind of physical activities and physical kind of things that boys are exposed to, they may be playing a big role. Now, this is a very interesting study, which has come about regarding a math test, where before one group of students, both boys and girls were told that there is no gender. Before that, they said, oh, okay, we are going to give you a test. Mind you, there is no gender difference has been found in this test between boys and girls. Okay. So finally, the test was given. You have a very, very, almost no significant difference between the women and men. On the other hand, another group, the same test was given, and it was said that, see, this is a test that shows some differences between male and females. And look at the big difference that it has created. So the kind of stereotyping. So obviously what has happened in the second instance, what has happened is women immediately shut off and said that, oh, this is not for us. This is for the boys. We won't do well anyway. So this kind of stereotyping has its own effect. And this is a very well-known effect that is occurring. And then you have what is known as the empathy versus systematization, extreme thing that women are more empathetic, whereas men are more logical and systematic and so on. So men are better for certain jobs, women are better for certain, the caregivers or that kind of jobs. And one extreme, again, the Simon Baron-Cohen study, it's called. They have hypothesized that males are very systematic, and sometimes it goes to such an extreme that extreme kind of male brain produces autism. And so this autistic boys, and autism is more common among boys because of this. And they have highly systematic brains, and so they will calculate and do all kinds of amazing mathematical things that you see in movies in which there are autistic characters. Unfortunately, again, that itself is a stereotype. The majority of, the vast majority of autistic children do not perform well in any of these areas, actually. It's only one exceptional one here or there. So that itself is a stereotype. And based on that stereotype, they have built a story, essentially a story. And if you ask what is the evidence for all this, nothing, absolute zero. Just that autism is more in boys. From that, they created a story. And this story reinforces some of these ideas regarding male brain and female brain. So if you really go into these actual studies, based on this, you are horrified how weak their evidence base is. Okay, so several aspects of this theory has been heavily criticized. Similarly, empathy and aggression, attributed more to one gender and given genetic and evolutionary explanations. Actually, in any of these cases, it's very, very difficult to sift nature from nurture. And so most of these have actually, such so-called studies have no meaning. And whatever differences found in all the studies are again very small and overlapping. Okay. And latest in the series are a study of using all kinds of sophisticated scans and showing that there are differences in the male and female brains. And this is a article again with what has come in Nature. Article that has come in Nature, calling it neurosexism. This is called neurosexism, the myth that men and women have different brains. So mainstream science, whether you see Science or Nature or any of this such Scientific American or any of this literature, if you look at, you find that nobody subscribes to this kind of things, So this is an example of that. Anyway, I think I have coming to the end of this talk. I think we need to do something about this, because obviously this kind of stereotyping is wrong. And so at least in our education, in our classes, our teacher training programs, let us emphasize to avoid stereotyping, appreciate the range of intelligences. Intelligence is not one factor which can be measured by the IQ. Human brain is actually so diverse functions it has, Some people may do well in one, may not do well in others. So there's a whole range of intelligences, and everybody may have strengths and everybody may have weaknesses. Strengthen spatial awareness, and because of physical activity and other things for girls, you strengthen the spatial awareness and such programs for girl children. Engage boys more with the words, because boys are not bad in language. Remember that Shakespeare and Kalidasa were boys actually. So engage boys with the word. Recruit boys into non-athletic extracurricular activities. Bring more men into the classroom. Let there be more men in teaching. So teacher bias, again, you have to correct teacher bias by proper educational programs for the teachers. The myth of this gendered division, which is a part of an evolutionary heritage that we inherited sometime in the Pleistocene era. Pleistocene era is Ice Age, when human beings rapidly evolved. So at that time, the theory is that right from that time, this division of labor and other things, and those who are hardwired into a genetist. See, modern era is completely different from the Pleistocene, if at all. And for modern era, these genes are, if at all, even if that argument were true, it may not be completely relevant at all for the modern era. So let us treat our current scenario quite differently. And the myth of the gendered brain, the female-male differences, has absolutely no meaning in, at least as far as science and biology are concerned. Human brain is said to be the most complex. If you take 1 kilogram of any material in the universe, known universe, the most complex 1 kilogram of material would be the human brain. And it's because of its huge billions, trillions and trillions of synaptic connections. Its capacity is much larger than even very large computers. But most of this capacity we do not, you do not use at all actually. And many of these capacities are not really needed to lead a simple biological life as an animal. And a lot of this capacity of the brain has been likened by Stephen Jay Gould, has beautifully likened it to what are called spandrels. See, look at this picture below. It's a Roman arch. When you build Roman arches, the arch is meant for bearing this weight on top. But an unintended consequence of the arch is this space, So this space we will decorate it and use all kinds of carvings or whatever in the spandrel, which are not needed for actually carrying this weight. Very similarly, human brain expanded to gain better function for our hands and for our speaking and communication areas. But the brain is a three-dimensional structure, so it increased three-dimensionally, and the neurons also, the connections of neurons also increased exponentially. So much so that we were left with lots and lots of brain power, whether male or whether female. All of us have lots and lots of excess brain power. So let us all use this instead of just arguing who has more and who has less. So with this, I will stop. Once again, saying that this status quo defense of right-wing ideology in the garb of science or pseudoscience has no meaning whatsoever. Thank you.
So we have come to the end of the session. So it's for the participants to unmute your mics and have a discussion if you wish. So it was an elaborate session, and a lot of aspects were covered regarding gender and all the other aspects. So if you wish to have a discussion with sir, you can unmute your mic and pose your query. Since only limited persons are there, you
Hello.
can always, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hello, sir. This is the first time I am attending a gender orientation workshop. So it was quite interesting that new insights were received. My question is regarding the gender identity and gender presentation. What I understand is there is a social construction as to how a man or a woman is to behave or to present themselves, how a boy, or even all this toy politics and everything. So a person who is there a chance that a person is not sure about their identity, and it is the construct of the society that makes them decide or lead to an identity that might be different from what they actually are?
Yeah, not being sure of one's own identity is a reality. And a lot of it is because the confusion is created by the society, and the society expects me to be something. I may feel something different, but I will try to constantly suppress that because thinking that this is something wrong. So unless you provide a proper environment in which everybody can express their identities freely, this always will happen. And lot of cases of this so-called sexual dysphoria or problems arise because of this. Lot of these problems will not arise provided I feel that whether whatever be my identity or orientation, if I express quite openly, there's nothing is going to happen. So then a lot of this mental stress and things will be there, will not be there, and we will be able to. So I think that is the way that we should strive our society to be. And some of the Western societies, at least slowly, they are moving towards that direction. I'm not saying that none of those are perfect. It is not. Let us not imagine that United States or there's a whole lot of homophobia and all kinds of problems in those societies also. So let us not imagine that, but there is a good progress in a particular direction in many of these societies. We in India are probably only taking the first steps even now.
Good afternoon, sir. It was really great listening to you. Right, though I don't belong to your medical profession or field, I teach English literature. I'm Pragna, and it was really great listening to you or trying to understand the very term gender and the other term sex from a different perspective. Since you said this is a discussion, the organizer said it's a discussion. Ms. Sunaina is talking about gender identity. So I can say that gender identity is how one sees oneself, the internal sense and the personal experience of gender. And this, Ms. Sunaina, and also gender expression, right? It is how you outwardly show your gender identity. Okay, that is the physical expressions we can say, in terms of clothing and the hairstyle or makeup and many things. And so thus we say, it reminds us also of Simone de Beauvoir's quote, one is not born but becomes a woman. And Cameron also says that, keep on, becoming man or woman. So gender is fluid. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, any more questions? Any more queries to answer? Yeah, if that is the case, I think the second Chinchu, the second speaker is over there, I suppose.
Yeah, he's already there.
Okay, fine. So our heartfelt thanks to KP Aravindan, Dr. KP Aravindan, for rendering this insightful, knowledgeable session. In fact, it was a lot of clarifications has been given on this two terms, sex, gender, and all the biological and all other aspects of the gender. So it was very insightful, sir, and it was actually we need to be knowledgeable about all these things. In fact, speaking about and studying about gender, and also even in discussing about gender. So moving on to the next speaker. So thank you, sir, actually for coming over here and spending all this time on behalf of the Youth Welfare Department and on behalf of the Women's Studies Center. I extend my heartfelt thanks.